My name is Abigail Carter, and I was 23 when everything shifted in a single evening. I had just graduated from college, the first in my family to do so, and the people who were supposed to be proud of me gathered for a small celebration at my Aunt Marie's townhouse in Seattle. The living room smelled of garlic knots from the little Italian bakery down the street, and a sheet cake from the grocery store sat on the counter with "Congratulations, Abby" scrawled across it in blue icing. It was simple, not extravagant, but I had thought it was enough. For once, I allowed myself to feel that maybe my years of effort had been noticed. I had worked for this moment since I was 16. While other kids went to dances or played sports, I was bagging groceries at Safeway after school, closing the diner on weekends, and walking neighborhood dogs before sunrise. Every paycheck went straight to the house. When the lights threatened to shut off, I quietly covered the bill. When the mortgage fell short, I slipped in my tips and overtime pay. Nobody outside our walls knew. To them, we were just another middle-class American family in a 4-bedroom house. But inside, I had been the one keeping us afloat. That night, though, all those years of sacrifice became invisible in a single sentence. My father, Daniel, tapped his fork against his glass, a smile tugging at his lips, one I recognized all too well, the kind of smile he wore when he was about to drop a demand he'd already decided was non-negotiable. My mother, Karen, sat beside him with her eyes lowered, folding a napkin into small triangles. My younger brother Leo, 16 and already taller than me, was half checked out of the evening, scrolling through his phone as if none of this mattered. My father cleared his throat. "Congratulations, Abby," he said, raising his glass. "You've graduated. You're grown now. Starting next month, you'll need to pay rent or move out." The clink of forks and low chatter died instantly. Even the old ceiling fan seemed to pause. My aunt shifted uncomfortably in her chair, and my mother nodded faintly, as if she had been rehearsing the line alongside him. For a moment, my chest tightened, and I felt that familiar burn in my throat that came before tears. But I swallowed it down. I had expected something like this. Maybe not this exact moment, but I had been preparing for years. I didn't argue. I didn't beg for recognition or remind them that I'd been paying bills quietly since I was 16. I simply placed my paper plate down, smoothed my skirt, and stood. "Thank you for being clear," I said calmly. I hugged Aunt Marie, kissed my mother on the cheek, and told Leo to keep his grades up. Then I walked out of the room before they could see anything cracked in my face. At 5 the next morning, while the house was still wrapped in silence, I packed 2 suitcases and 1 box of books into a rideshare and left. The split-level home in Rainier Beach that I had poured so much of my youth into slipped behind me in the rearview mirror. I did not look back. What they didn't know was that I already had a new place waiting for me. 3 weeks earlier, I had closed on a modest 2-bedroom, 1-bath house in Tacoma, about 40 minutes south of Seattle. The little place sat on a quiet street with a small maple tree in the front yard and a garage that leaned slightly to the left. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. I had signed the papers for $289,000 with a fixed-rate loan, placing a $45,000 down payment, which I had saved in secret since I was a teenager. Every birthday bonus, every double shift, every tax refund, penny by penny, I had built my escape fund. The monthly payment came to $1,735 with taxes and insurance. I had run those numbers over and over, scribbled them on scraps of paper, memorized them the way other people memorize song lyrics. I knew I could manage it. For the first time in my life, the floor beneath me would be something I had chosen, not something I was desperately holding together. When I unlocked the door, the house was silent. The walls were painted a soft cream, and the hardwood floors were scratched but clean. Sunlight streamed through the bare windows, and the air smelled faintly of fresh paint and dust. I set my suitcase down in the middle of the living room and just stood there for a long moment, listening to the stillness. The silence didn't feel lonely, it felt safe. By noon, I had made the place livable. A friend had loaned me a table and 2 chairs. I hauled in my mattress and spread it on the floor of the back bedroom. In the kitchen, I set a small kettle on the stove, my first piece of comfort in a space that was now my own. That afternoon, my phone buzzed relentlessly. First came the angry text from my father. "You're selfish. You walked out like a child. After everything we've done for you." My mother's messages were quieter but sharper, saying I had shamed them by storming out in front of family. Only Leo's message felt genuine. "Are you okay?" I told him I was fine, told him to drink water and finish his math homework. I ignored the others. Instead, I brewed a cup of tea, sat at the lone table, and wrote a list on a yellow legal pad. New job paperwork. Power bill. Wi-Fi installation. Replace the lock on the back door. Find a small couch at a thrift store. Buy a welcome mat that says home. That night, I lay on the mattress with the windows cracked open. The maple outside shifted in the wind, its leaves brushing softly against the siding. I thought about the years behind me. Every late-night diner shift, every grocery bag lifted, every time I had covered a bill while my father chased a lucky streak or my mother covered his tracks. For the first time, I realized that all of those sacrifices had carried me here. Not to them, but to this house. To my own future. As the night deepened, I listened to the quiet rhythm of the neighborhood. No raised voices. No arguments behind closed doors. Just the steady sound of rain starting against the roof, like the world itself had decided to wash everything clean. I pulled the blanket tighter around me, closed my eyes, and felt something click into place inside me. It was the sound of a door shutting, not behind me, but inside me. A decision, final and firm. I was done living for their approval, done carrying their weight without thanks. I had built this life quietly, piece by piece, and now it was time to live it fully. When I woke the next morning, the rain had stopped. The maple trees sparkled with droplets in the sunlight, and for the first time in years, I smiled just for myself. This was only the beginning, but it was mine. 2 days after I left the house, I met my parents in the parking lot of a family restaurant in downtown Seattle. They had picked the place, not me. I recognized it immediately. The neon sign flickered, the letters missing half their glow, and the inside always smelled of burnt coffee and carpet cleaner. I hadn't eaten there in years, but stepping inside felt like walking back into every tense family dinner we'd ever had. My father was already seated in a booth, arms crossed over his chest like a barricade. He didn't smile, didn't nod, didn't even offer the kind of stiff acknowledgement that most strangers exchange in passing. My mother sat across from him, her fingers pressed flat against the paper menu, tracing the words as if they were lines of scripture. She wouldn't look at me. I noticed how her hair, usually styled, hung limp around her face. Leo wasn't there, and for that I was grateful. He didn't need to carry any more of this than he already did. I slid into the booth and set a thin blue binder on the table between us. The cover was plain, no label, but I felt its weight as though I was carrying years of my own history. I had built it the week I closed on the house, preparing for the day when truth would finally have to sit face to face with excuses. Before they could begin their practice lines, before my father could bark about responsibility, or my mother could sigh about sacrifice, I spoke. Before we talk about rent or what I owe, we need the truth on the table. My voice didn't shake. It surprised even me. I opened the binder and turned it toward them. The first page was neatly labeled 2016, the year I turned 16. Beneath it was a copy of the electric bill marked past due, highlighted in yellow. Attached was my debit card statement showing a payment of $420 made from my account. When I was 16, I said, sliding the page to my mother, I paid the electric bill to keep the lights from shutting off. Here's the confirmation number. My mother's eyes darted down, then away. I turned to my father and flipped to the section labeled 2017. When I was 17, I covered 3 mortgage payments out of tips. That totaled $2,310. Here are the money order receipts. His face tightened. He shifted in his seat. You did this without asking, he said, his voice low and sharp. I did it because the bank doesn't wait for excuses, I replied. I kept my voice even, my hands steady. I would not rise to his anger. The pages kept turning, one year after another. Gas bills. Grocery store runs. When the car needed new tires, I put $620 on my card so Mom could keep getting to work. The month Dad swore his paycheck was delayed, and I wired $1,050 to the mortgage company minutes before midnight to stop foreclosure. I watched as their faces shifted, first denial, then discomfort, then the faintest flicker of shame. The total, I said finally, flipping to the last page of the binder, is $28,472.81. That is what I have contributed to this household since I was 16 years old. My mother's lips trembled. She whispered, "We didn't know the total." I nodded slowly, then reached for the final section. My hand lingered on it before I opened the tab. This was the part that mattered most, the part that hurt to say aloud. Inside were printouts, screenshots of emails, highlighted bank statements, and withdrawal slips. Online poker accounts. Cash taken from ATMs inside casinos between Spokane and the Oregon border. I had matched dates to the weeks our mortgage payments had gone unpaid. I placed them on the table and spoke quietly. "Dad, you have a gambling problem. The numbers prove it. And Mom, you cover for him. These statements are yours. You handed them to me last year to check for errors. The only error is pretending not to see." My father's face went red. He slammed his palm on the table so hard the forks rattled. "You think you're better than us," he spat. "No," I said softly, though my pulse hammered in my ears. "I think I'm done keeping quiet." Silence pressed against us, thick and heavy. The waitress approached, then retreated quickly when she saw our faces. From my pocket, I pulled a single-page document, typed, dated, and signed. I laid it flat between us. "Here is what I will do. Nothing more, nothing less." I tapped the page. "I will cover one emergency night at the Harbor Motel on 4th Avenue, $129 before tax. That buys you space to breathe. After that, no rent, no utilities, no food money from me. What I will do instead is help you create a budget. I will print a list of free counseling and gamblers' anonymous meetings within 15 minutes of the house. Dad, the plan requires you to attend 3 meetings a week. Mom, the plan requires you to apply for full-time work. There are openings at the hospital cafeteria." I checked. "As for Leo, he will need to pick up a part-time job, 10 hours on weekends. I'll drive him to his first interview if needed. That's it." My mother's voice cracked. "We can't make it without you." "You can," I said firmly. "You are adults. Leo is old enough to contribute too. But I will not bleed myself dry while you refuse to face the truth." My father stared at the binder, then at me. The anger in his eyes dimmed into something hollow. For a moment I thought he might break down. Instead, he said nothing. His silence told me more than words could. I signed the motel receipt, slid it across the table, and stood. "I love you," I said. "I want a healthy family. But this," I gestured to the binder, the receipts, the lies, "is the only road I can walk now." As I walked out of the restaurant, the rain had just begun to fall, tapping lightly against the awning. My reflection in the wet pavement looked steadier than I felt, but I kept walking. For the first time in years, I wasn't covering anyone's bill, wasn't hiding anyone's mess. I was telling the truth and letting it stand. The Monday after our tense meeting at the restaurant, I began my new job at a logistics firm in Tacoma. The building itself was plain, a squat gray structure near the waterfront, but stepping into the lobby that morning felt like stepping into a future I had carved for myself. My manager, Olivia, greeted me wearing bright red sneakers and a blazer, a mix of comfort and authority I immediately admired. She spoke quickly, always with a list in hand, and she seemed like someone who valued effort over excuses. The position paid $68,000 a year with full health insurance, and they gave me a $2,000 signing bonus that hit my account within days. For the first time in my life, money flowed in without having to calculate how much of it needed to vanish immediately into overdue bills. I set up direct deposit and created 2 accounts, one for the mortgage and utilities, and another for home repairs. I also opened a small emergency fund, transferring the entire signing bonus into it without hesitation. That account, I promised myself, would only ever be touched in true emergencies, not to cover anyone's bets, not to patch anyone's reckless spending. Each evening after work, I returned to my little house and poured myself into it. The first week, I tackled the scuffed hardwood floors. I couldn't afford professional help, so I sanded them down 6 inches at a time on my knees, listening to podcasts in the background. The second week, I found a couch at a secondhand shop for $95. The fabric was worn but sturdy, and I hauled it home with the help of a neighbor. The third week, I painted the front door a bold navy blue, then planted rosemary in mismatched pots by the steps. It wasn't magazine perfect, but it was mine, and every brushstroke, every nail hammered, felt like an act of claiming. On Friday nights, instead of collapsing into exhaustion, I began a ritual. I boiled pasta, opened a cheap bottle of red wine, and invited my friend Maya from college and her partner, Ben, over for dinner. We ate cross-legged on the floor at first, laughing about how I didn't even own proper chairs. Slowly, the conversations shifted from small talk to deeper subjects: budgets, bosses, the strange ways we learned to apologize for simply existing. Those evenings grounded me. They reminded me that I was building more than a house. I was building a life, with connections that were honest and free of manipulation. At the 30-day mark, I kept my word and checked in with my family. My father didn't call, but my mother did. Her voice was tired, but it carried something new: resolve. She had secured a full-time job as a clerk at a dental office near Pioneer Square. The pay was $21 an hour, with benefits set to kick in after 90 days. "I can do this," she said. I didn't think I could, but I can. For the first time in years, I believed her. Leo surprised me, too. He sent a picture of himself in a smoothie shop uniform, grinning sheepishly behind the counter. He was working 12 hours every weekend, saving half his pay in a clear glass jar on his dresser. "I want to buy a used laptop," he texted. "They told me I can find one for about $400. I replied that I would match $100 if he kept his grades up. 2 days later, he sent me a photo of a math test marked with a bright red 92. Pride swelled in me, not because I had promised him money, but because he was finally believing in himself. My father's update came in a text message, short and blunt. "Went to first GA meeting. Not proud. I'll go back." I didn't respond right away. I let the message sit for hours before I wrote back. I believe in change that lasts. I wasn't interested in quick apologies anymore. I wanted proof of steady steps. In 60 days, I invited them to my house. I cooked a simple dinner: roast chicken, potatoes, and green beans, and set the table with 4 mismatched plates I had found at a thrift shop. They sat together at my small kitchen table, sunlight slanting through the windows and painting the walls with gold. My father looked thinner, his eyes less restless. My mother's posture was straighter, her voice steadier. Leo glanced around my little house with a mixture of awe and curiosity, asking if he could help me build shelves in the garage. We spoke carefully, as if testing new ground. There were pauses, but not the angry kind, pauses that gave us time to think before spilling words we might regret. We laughed once, at something Leo said about his smoothie shop customers, and the sound startled me with its normalcy. After dessert, I brought out the blue binder. I laid it on the table, not as a weapon but as a reminder. Together, we updated the plan. My father had reached 39 days without gambling. My mother had collected 2 full-time paychecks. Leo had saved $290 toward his laptop. I repeated my boundary. There would be no cash from me. Instead, I gave them a printed budget template and a list of affordable groceries. I sat with Leo and built a school and work calendar so he wouldn't exhaust himself, making sure weekends still left room for rest and play. That night, after they left, I sat on the porch steps and watched the streetlights flicker on one by one. The cool air brushed against my skin, carrying the smell of the rosemary I had planted weeks before. For once, I didn't run the numbers over and over in my head. I didn't clutch at my calculator like it was a lifeline. Instead, I simply breathed and let the moment be enough. My house felt like a promise I could keep, not just to myself, but to the kind of life I was building. A life where boundaries weren't walls to shut people out, but fences that kept chaos at bay. A life where love meant accountability, not endless sacrifice. In those 3 months, I had learned something no classroom had ever taught me, that stability doesn't come from rescuing others, but from choosing yourself first, and then inviting others to rise to meet you. On the 93rd day, I woke to the steady rhythm of rain drumming softly on my roof. The sound was steady, almost like a heartbeat, and for once it didn't feel heavy, it felt cleansing. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. I reached for it, still half asleep, and saw my father's name on the screen. The message was short. 90 days. No bets. I have a meeting every week. I got a sponsor named Paul. Attached was a photo of his hand, palm open, holding a small bronze coin stamped with 90 days. I stared at it for a long time, the image blurring as the screen dimmed, then relit when I touched it again. I set the phone down, walked to the kitchen, and brewed coffee. The pride that filled me wasn't the old kind, the pride of carrying my family's weight in silence. It was a different kind, quieter but stronger. I was proud not for fixing him, but for refusing to carry what was never mine to begin with. That evening, we met at a park along the Seattle waterfront. The rain had cleared, leaving the air sharp with the scent of salt and wet pavement. My mother was already there, her work badge hanging from a lanyard around her neck. For the first time in years, she looked like herself, not worn down, not carrying someone else's burdens, but steady. Leo bounced over from the swings, grinning. He told me his boss at the smoothie shop had offered him a 3-hour weekday shift after school. That way, he could trade some of his weekend hours for more time to study. He proudly explained that he had saved enough for a used laptop, $380, and that it worked just fine. Then he added, almost shyly, that he wanted to start a lawn care business that summer. He'd already found a mower online for $120 and was planning to pitch his services around the neighborhood. We walked to a bench overlooking the water. The sky was streaked pink and gray, gulls circling overhead. My father sat beside me, his hands clasped, the coin turning slowly between his fingers. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked but held steady. "I'm sorry," he said. "Not the easy kind of sorry. The kind that looks at what I did. I gambled away food money, mortgage money. I lied to you and to your mother. I'm not proud, but I'm doing the work to stop." My mother nodded, her eyes glistening. "I'm sorry, too. I thought I was protecting the family by covering for him. But I see now all I did was help him hide. I won't do that anymore." I folded my hands in my lap and spoke the truth that had carried me this far. "I love you both, but I'm not your lender, not your fixer. I'm your daughter. And if we're going to have a relationship that lasts, my boundaries stay in place." The silence that followed wasn't heavy, it was freeing. It was the kind of silence that comes when everyone in the room finally agrees to stop lying to themselves. We built the next steps right there, scribbled on the back of a crumpled receipt from Leo's pocket. My father would continue attending meetings and show my mother his bank app every Friday. My mother would keep saving 10% of her paycheck. Leo would put $25 a week into a small savings account with his name on it, learning early what it meant to build something for himself. And once a month, we'd gather at my house, not just to talk about money, but to eat, laugh, and build something resembling family again. If old patterns crept back in, we'd skip a month to regroup instead of pretending everything was fine. Later that night, back in Tacoma, I stood in my kitchen and looked around. My little house didn't feel empty anymore. A rug I'd thrifted for $40 lay under the table. A framed photo from my college graduation sat propped against the backsplash. The walls, once bare, now carried a warmth that came not from expensive furniture, but from intention. I had paid my mortgage on time for 3 months in a row. My emergency fund sat at $2,400. On the fridge, a handwritten list of small goals waited for me. Fix the leaning garage, save for a reliable used car, take Leo to a Mariners game in the summer, and splurge on the cheap seats. As I turned off the kitchen light, I paused in the doorway and let the quiet settle around me. For years, I had believed love meant rescuing. Love meant working doubles to keep the lights on. Love meant hiding bank statements, covering debts, and never saying no. But now I knew better. Love wasn't an endless sacrifice. Love was truth and accountability. Love was telling my father he had to face his gambling problem head-on. Love was telling my mother she had to stop enabling him. Love was expecting my younger brother to contribute, to learn the value of his own effort. Love was one paid motel night, not a lifetime of carrying other people's choices. Love, I realized, was also protecting my own future. It was sitting in this house that I had bought with years of invisible work, finally allowing myself to breathe. It was paying my own bills on time and setting goals that had nothing to do with fixing anyone else. 3 months had taught me a lesson I would carry for the rest of my life. I cannot save people by giving them what they refuse to earn. I can only invite them to meet me on solid ground. And to my surprise, when I finally stopped carrying everyone, they found their own footing. My father was working on his recovery. My mother was building her independence. Leo was starting to dream beyond just surviving. We weren't perfect, but we were stable. For the first time in years, stability lived in our house, not because I held it up alone, but because each of us carried our share. I keep the binder on a shelf in my living room, not to pull out in anger, but as a reminder. It holds numbers, yes, but more than that, it holds proof that courage and boundaries can change everything. My name is Abigail Carter. I am a recent graduate, a homeowner, a daughter, and a sister. I protect my future, and I still choose my family. Boundaries didn't break us. They built us.